Alongside her teaching role, Jordan shares ideas, support, and resources through Instagram, TikTok, and her weekly blog. Welcome to the show, Jordan.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You are welcome. So, you work in a specialist provision attached to a mainstream school.
Yeah.
So, how do you assess when so many schools struggle to show progress for pupils with SEND?
Yeah, so often progress is obviously tiny steps, sometimes teeny tiny. Sometimes they look like backward steps before you go forward. And it is a really good it's a really good question. It's a question I get in my DMs often is how do you show progress? Obviously, it's really important to have the data. I'm attached to a mainstream school, so they're obsessed with data even more than I would be in a
Yeah.
specialist provision. Um, but I use something that I've always used in all of the schools I've worked at, which is B squared. And it basically breaks up big levels into tiny statements that children can prove to achieve through practical stuff often. And we get photos of it, log it on to B squared, and then that shows the levels and they make progress that way. We even break down the statements that B squared give us, even to even smaller steps, sometimes through IEPs and, we use evidence profiles as well. So like engagement profiles, to break it down into tiny steps so that we can show the progress that we're making. Sometimes it's a breadth of progress as well, isn't it? So for example, if the
Yes.
statement is throw a ball, well, they might be able to throw this particular ball on this particular day in this particular lesson with this particular adult. But actually, there's a lot of more skills there that need to happen before we tick that box to say that they can do it. Can they throw softballs, hard balls, wide balls? Can they throw it in the hall, outside, indoors? So often we're looking of breadth as well as, linear progress as well.
I always love having those conversations around things like throw a ball, and you go to a school and you do some training. Like, what happens if I throw a ball in my class, but they weren't in their classroom? And you're like, well, that's a lot of unpicking. Is it they
Yeah.
cannot in that classroom, or is it a choice? Is it something about that it makes them dysregulate? There's so many things you have to unpick.
Yeah, and sometimes autism leads to them making patterns, rigid patterns, to make the world make sense. Because the world doesn't make sense, right? The world is built around, people that aren't autistic. So they want to make it make sense. Sometimes they might have just made a rigid pattern that this is how I do it in this classroom and not in others. So I've worked with the same kids for 7 years in one classroom. And we've recently moved 2 year 7s into a classroom right next door because there wasn't a secondary school placed for them. And it has been fascinating watching what they can't do in the new classroom because it's the same person, it's the same structure, lesson, TAs, everything. We've literally replicated the whole classroom, but it's not the same. So all of a sudden, they can't write, they can't trace, they can't communicate and use their AAC like they were, even though we know they can. That to me has been such a fascinating experiment on this rigidity that I'm talking about. I mean, slowly as anxiety reduces and slowly we build up those skills again, but it's absolutely fascinating to witness.
That's really fascinating. You've worked with the same children for 7 years, because generally you either work with them for a year, typically, but
Yeah.
sometimes a couple of years.
No,
But
never.
7 years, that's really probably fascinating for you to see those changes over that time.
Yeah, so I've taught for 15 years and I've only ever taught 3 classes. So I've taught them for 5 years at a time, and then this one is going towards 7. So yeah, you know them so intimately, and the family so intimately. I can assess my children. I just know them. I don't have to have stuff written down often, or even look at the photos. I just know them so well by that point. I can almost guess what they're going to do. It's quite dangerous territory, but you just know them so well. But I was still surprised when my year 7s went into this next classroom and they weren't doing what I know they can do. Is just, you're learning every day in this job, right?
I bet. And interesting, Joanna Grace, who does a lot on complex needs and sensories,
Mm-hmm.
and when you have non-speaking children, it's you need to learn how to listen to them,
Yeah.
because they are communicating, but perhaps you're looking at a too high a level, perhaps you're looking for a too bigger thing. But when you kind of tune in, which hopefully you've done in 7 years, you said you really know them. You know that when they walk in, oh, hang on, that's not a great something's not right, or you'll be able to read them, and it's not, you're not really guessing, you're knowing. It's just not really explicitly communicated, but you know.
That's right. It's not communicated by words. Sometimes it's just a gut feeling. Sometimes you can just see a little change in their face, or a change in their body, or a shift in their eye gaze, and you've seen that movement before, and you know what it's meant. And I suppose a picture is built over years and years, and experience after experience together. And I'm sure they're doing it to us too. You know,
Oh
they're
yeah.
working out our moods, and what we're doing, and what we're just about to do, and that we're a little bit, different or whatever. And we're both working it out together. It's one of the best things I love about the job, honestly, is that you can build that relationship over years and years and years. I think I would feel a bit shortchanged if I only had my class for a year now. I would only just be getting started, honestly. I don't know how teachers do it and still feel satisfied. I love seeing the big picture, thinking about where they've come from. We get them from age 4 and they leave us at age 11 in our class. That is a huge length of time to be able to see how much they progress, build confidence with the family and relationship with the family. So much can change for a young person in that time that it's just really exciting to see that.
And it is. And then watching them go to the next classroom where you've got everything set up the same, you kind of literally duplicate it apart from you.
Well, no, I'm leading both.
Oh, okay.
I'm even leading both rooms, and it's still not working.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love.
Do you know what it was though? In the end, so we're 7 weeks into that new classroom now, and my TA said, "We're not using the same book. We're not using the same book." So we went back to the old class, we found their tray, we got their exact textbook. We were using the same looking textbook, but because it was new, we would want it new. We got their old textbook, their old ruler, their old pencil case, put it down. All of a sudden, they could write.
Wow. Because I always love it. And we know that children over summer regress.
Mm-hmm.
And
all children as well. That's all children.
All children.
Right.
And adults. Summer holiday. Yeah. 2 weeks away, I regress. But we also know that changing from a primary to a secondary, even in a specialist setting, even in an all-age school, changing from you going to that part of the school to that part of the school, however, those changes have a negative impact for a short term. But so do you record that regression as it is and not be able to, or do you just almost annotate it?
Yeah, no, I don't actually. I don't know how I would record the regression. I suppose it's recorded through other means of behavior plans, risk assessments, things like that, if there's anything specific that's happening. But as for learning, I suppose if they've reached that level at one point, they will always be at that level. We'll just be aware of, we know they can do that, but what scaffolding do we need to put in place in order to help them get there again? So I guess on a data printed level, it would look like they haven't made progress, whereas we know there's actually a hell of a lot going on. There might be a lot of anxiety, there might be changes at home, there might be changes in hormones, health, whatever it is. They might have had a lot of time out of school. That's often a problem that we face often in SEN provision. But they stay on printed paper at that level. Just we're working really hard to try and build that up again. It might be that it's shown in their IEPs, honestly. Sometimes their IEPs might look like, well, hang on, they've already done that target. Actually, we kind of step it back, or we broaden out the skill. We simplify it maybe. And it looks like lots more scaffolding and resources put in place in order to reach back to that level again. But it does happen. Sometimes we shift focus on what assessment we're using. So we might go to an engagement profile for a little while until we've kind of got them back on track. We've built those relationships again, and then we carry on with what we were doing. It's individual for every single child. It looks different for every child.
Because in B squared, we can show regression. So something which they could achieve, you can reduce. You can change that mastered down to gaining skills or engaged.
Interesting.
Great. However, to kind of show that drop down and then the build back up, you've got to do so much assessing to be able to show that. It's kind of a lot of work. So when schools go, oh, we could, I always sit there and go, you can, but should you?
Yeah.
could you not just annotate, which is a bit like what you're doing? You've got lots of bits of evidence showing that they're not doing it, but almost like leave the data where it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we kind of have a really simplified. Well, before it's quite funny actually. I was in my last school, and we were using iPads, we were using B squared. You know, it was very data driven. That was 10 years ago, and then my new school, came to it, and we were still. I mean, typical Cornwall. I've gone from Essex to Cornwall. We were printing photos, we were cutting, we were sticking, we were handwriting. You know, it was like
Old
a decade
school.
behind. Yeah, so slowly after 7 years there, we've got to the iPads and actually evidencing through digital media since. And I suppose that has allowed us to annotate in that way, to show the graphs and to show the data. Whereas before we were highlighting pink for think, you know, they're still thinking about it, and green for go, as in they've achieved it. That was as much as
I am
as
loving
showing
pink
that.
for think.
I don't know who came up with that. I
Because
can't take credit for it.
no, we use like the yellow and orange. Somebody nicknamed it the dehydration scale, which is now stuck in my head now. But in green is achieved. But I do almost like that part way there. Pink for think is like, yeah, engage, doing something, but not there yet.
They're thinking about it. They're thinking about doing it.
So simple.
But yeah, that worked for us for a time. I mean, it was really clear when we looked at the sheet. You know, you see a load of pink on there. Okay, well, maybe they're still working towards it. We won't move them on yet, or maybe we'll think about broadening that skill rather than moving them up. So, but yeah, we do that termly. So we'll have a look at what evidence the TAs have gathered. Ultimately, they're the ones that are with them day in, day out, every single lesson. So we'll look at what photos and evidence they feel like they've achieved, and then we'll think, okay, well, do we broaden that skill? What support do we put in place if they're still on pink? Or actually, if it's all green, we're ready to go, they've perfectly achieved it, even if it's after just a couple of weeks, then we can move them on. And sometimes children, all of a sudden the skill just drops, and all of a sudden they go whoop, and surpass 3-4 levels, because all of a sudden they've got that, I don't know, communication skill, for example. All of a sudden, often, maybe actually it's our fault, they could always actually achieve it. It was just we weren't giving them the opportunity for them to show us that they can achieve it. Often in this job, it's more about facilitating an opportunity to show us what they already know than actually teaching them, honestly, isn't it?
I also think there is a thing with neurodiverse that kind of you don't get a concept. And then when you get that concept, it can get locked in, is my experience. There are things I struggled with in maths.
Yeah.
And I remember at junior school being towards the bottom and being told off. And then the next thing I know, 2 years later, I was in the top group.
Because
it just something finally clicked, and I could just see it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell you what it was. I can't tell you. It might have been just doing it so many times and then finally seeing the pattern, then going, and then everything was really easy.
Yeah. I mean, it's so my job, I would say, isn't even teaching. I would say I'm much more of a facilitator. I really would. I'm thinking of, I'm learning the children, I'm learning what motivates them and engages them, and I'm trying to facilitate learning that looks like what they love, but that shows me what they can do. So, and that means it's different every year, right? For every different pupil is kind of working on a different skill, but I'm going to try and make it as fun and engaging as possible, so that their anxiety is reduced, they're motivated by it, they're engaged, and they can show me what they know. And then I'm there thinking, you can do that, you can do that, you can do that. Rather than, right, today, kids, we're going to learn. It just doesn't work like that in SEN provision. I don't think so anyway.
No, my wife has found that when you start saying things like that, they're like, hang on, this is looking very much like learning. I'm not doing this. Whereas,
and high demand as well. Like, demands are like, nuh-uh, no thank you. I've seen something that looks like this before. And actually, that made me feel really bad about myself. I couldn't do it. I found it difficult. I found it stressful. No, I'm going to stay in my sensory den, thank you.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, if it looks like fun and play, low demand, errorless learning, well, why wouldn't you want to do that?
Definitely. So things I'm kind of hearing is it kind of the assessment, those smaller steps, kind of everything bolts on top of that.
Yes.
Very much relationship.
Very much.
And the assessing or seeing what that learning looks like is not you're accepting their way of showing what they can do in the way that works for them.
Yeah, and in an order that works for them. So in my mind, I'm like, we're doing science. My learning objectives are, do they understand light and shadow, and do they explore? Actually, they might then end up lining all of my resources up, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's what we're learning in maths. That's amazing. I'll tick that box instead. It's also just being open to what they feel like showing you that day, and knowing it well enough, and knowing them well enough to run with it, I think.
And because I think, obviously, I've been doing the small sets of progress for 20 something years.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it is in everything in life, everything always has smaller steps. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you're changing a tire, there are a certain number of steps. When you're doing that, and my children will go, "Oh, my computer's not working." "Oh, is it not turning on?" "Well, yeah, it's on, so it's working then." "Well, no. Well, it's working. You said it's turned on." "Well, no, the game isn't working." "Oh, is it not opening?" "No, I'm in the game." And it's that, what is it that you need help with? That, and we often just go the big step. Like, my computer's not working, or this isn't working, or blah blah, but it's always these smaller steps, and the smaller steps are a great way, because I'm literally having this conversation as I'm walking up to their room, really being sarcastic. When I finally get to their room, they've basically said the sound isn't working in the game, or something like that. And I'm like, cool, I now know where to investigate. And I just think small steps in generally everything are what really helps. If you do not have those small steps, if you're miles out of your comfort zone, yeah, if you're used to teaching year 5 and you've now got a child working at year 1, or you're used to teaching year 3, you've got a non-speaking child.
That's exactly it.
What do I do? How do I do it? What's it looking like?
So I get it in my DMs all the time. I'm going to teach history. We're doing Vikings. What does that look like for a child working at 6 months? What does that look like for a child working at 18 months? And I think, go to B squared. Have a look at the statements. Yes, it might not be under history, but it might be under exploration. It might be under, I do as perceived self. So it would be the self, and it would be all about me. Do they notice someone walking in? Do they hear sound? Do they notice, when someone's 50 centimeters in front of them? Whatever statement it is, that's what Vikings looks like for them. Because unless they have a sense of self and a sense of other, how can they then learn about their history, their heritage, their family? But it takes a creative, outside of the box thinker and support from the statements in order to know that. So often when I'm planning, that's exactly what I do. I have a look at what mainstream, because I'm attached to a mainstream school, what mainstream are doing. This is why I created my sensory curriculum, because it doesn't make sense. I can't do Vikings. I can't do whatever. Or what does that look like for my learners that's meaningful? I could, of course, do Vikings. Actually, what are they getting out of that? Am I just ticking an Ofsted box, or am I actually meeting the needs of my students? Actually, I found out a way to do both. I can take what mainstream are learning. I have a look at the B squared statements. What does that look like for my learners? My learners are ranged from the needs of 3 months to about 3 years in my classroom. So I have a look at what that might look like in the statements. And obviously, of course, they're spiky all over the place as well. So what does that look like for these individuals? And then what learning will motivate them in order to achieve those goals? It might not look like Vikings at all. When you walk into my room, you won't see Vikings, but we are working towards it. You will see the linear approach as my SEN learners work up the school. I have them for 7 years. Maybe by year 6, we're at age 5 and we're actually doing similar to what the EYFS are doing in mainstream. Maybe not. It almost doesn't matter, but we're still working towards that target of, why are they learning about Vikings? It's to learn about yourself and your heritage and where you come from, and to make better choices for yourself in the future. Well, so are we. We're just doing it, through sensory play.
Out of curiosity, which frameworks from B squared are you using?
Yeah, so I'm using primary steps and I'm using engagement steps with my learners. The 3 months, kind of 18 months are kind of doing engagement steps, then leading into primary steps, and then we go up from there. It's a really lovely step up, actually, because you can really easily hover through both for a little while, and often they do with some of the subjects. Often the gross motor skills one, they go into primary steps quite quickly because they can run, they can jump, they can climb. But actually some of those relationship building ones, often receptive communication, expressive communication is often then stays in the engagement steps for quite a while. So we kind of hover between both of those for my learners, and they kind of swing between each depending on what the skill set level is.
And in the primary steps, which subjects do you have?
We do maths, communication, English, science. We do PE, including swimming. We cover, is that one? Oh, PSHE, obviously.
Yep.
So we try and cover lots of the core. And then humanities is kind of in science, really. There's heritage in there. So we try and cover the full breadth that a mainstream classroom would, honestly, but it just looks maybe a little bit different for my learners.
So you've got our core pack, which is English, maths, and science. And what so many schools I talk to go English, maths, English, maths, English, maths. They also, when they think English, think reading and writing. It's like, no, spoken language is in there.
Yeah, no,
really
spoken's
important.
actually the most important. Yeah.
And I like the fact you called it communication.
Mm.
I hate the fact it's called spoken language because
Yeah.
it infers it has to be said, it has to be spoken. Whereas your reading assessments, it can be done in lots of different ways.
Yeah, so on the EHCP, it's actually called communication and interaction. I actually love that statement because that's really is what we're looking for, isn't it? We're looking for receptive and expressive communication, and we're looking for that interaction, which could be fleeting eye contact, could be a massive win. You know, it doesn't have to be intentional even. It could be sometimes just completely text, like a fleeting glance over, and I'm like, oh my God, that's made my week.
Because it is, that fleeting glance, there's a lot of meaning in that. And you know that.
Mm-hmm.
You know that from your younger days when you were out in a bar, when you get that glance, what it meant.
Yeah.
We know what that look can mean. We know
it
it's
can mean
not
1,000 words.
Yes. So in science, one of the things that, again, our science, we have all the 16 topic areas.
You do. It's a lot. So it's awesome. So we try and cover all of it. So we have a 4-year rotating curriculum. It's all on my website. And we, across those 4 years, will cover all of those 16 areas. So we might make 1 year and we might only cover 6 of them because every half term we might change. But across the 4 years, we will cover all 16. So as far as B squared statements are concerned, it might take them 4 years in order for them to reach every goal, but then we rotate again. So we have them for 7 years. So we've got the luxury of taking our time with it and really going into depth in the topic and making it really meaningful and giving them a chance to show us what they really know.
And what's nice is that we have, like as you said, what do I do for a child working this? Because all our areas, everything we do in the primary, every single subject goes down to 18 months. When you've got a child in year 6 working on, and you're supposed to be in electricity, but they're working at year 2, that's fine. We can show you this is what that topic looks like at year 2.
Yeah, and it's really, sometimes it's like, oh, of course it's switching on and off buttons and cause and effect. Of course it's that. But actually, if you've been teaching a different class, even if you're an SEN teacher, even if you've got years of experience, if you've been teaching children that are working in year 1, and all of a sudden you go to a class that are working at year 3 months to kind of 6 months, it is a completely different job role. Just like if you're a year 6 teacher going down to EYFS, it feels the same. And I don't think some people understand that because sometimes SEN, depending on one child could come into your room and it changes the whole dynamic. And all of a sudden you've got to learn a whole new way of teaching and learning. And actually that's the kind of scaffolding for the teacher really is what does that look like? How can I show skills? Or okay, right, they're counting pennies, but they're definitely not ready to work out change yet. What is that middle step?
Yes.
Often it's money, actually. What does money look like for children working at months? Well, it's about exchange. It's about interaction. It's about getting out in the environment sometimes. It's about handing something over, reaching for something and getting it in return. All of those kind of things will be on B squared somewhere. And then that's what money looks like. Sometimes it doesn't involve coins until they're like right at the end of my class. But that doesn't mean we're not working on money. We still are. We're just learning those foundation skills.
And the other bit, because you're talking about the Vikings, is everything apart from science is the nightmare. You cannot avoid the topics.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, geography, history, whatever it is we do, we ignore the topic.
Yeah.
We really look at the skills. And I'm really hoping the curriculum assessment review pushes more skills rather than knowledge. I prefer skills. And it means that you can be doing that year 6 topic.
Yeah.
But what does that look like for a child at year one? And it's there for you.
Yeah.
And that's what I think loads of teachers struggle with the SEM, with this kind of increasing level of need, increasing number of students with needs.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? And they really struggle.
Yeah, that's right. Because all mainstream teachers are SEN teachers now. Like, there is
Yep.
no such thing as mainstream versus SEN. Like, the amount of need that I'm seeing that mainstream teachers are managing in my school is honestly mind-blowing. I could fill my class 3 times over, and we only have 10 students in my class. That is the limit. But my goodness, is there so much need in mainstream. Some of the needs in mainstream are even higher than the ones in my class. I don't know how county worked that out, but it's just a fact. It just is. So these teachers, and it's not for want of caring or
No.
trying or wanting to do the best, we're just not taught that in our teacher training. So I did mainstream teacher training. I know that we covered SEN for an hour in the year of my PGCE.
That
Now
makes
the
me
fact
rock.
now the fact that every single teacher has such high levels of need in their class now, and that is the training that they are being provided with. I mean, I hope it's changed. That was a long time ago. I really hope it's changed. But I'm see you shaking your head that I assume
No,
it hasn't.
no, it's still
Huge
not.
reform is needed in the teacher training process. I mean, I think that's honestly why my podcast and why my blog and why my Instagram has blown up so much. I only started it in Christmas. I'm at 130,000 followers. I think it's just mainstream teachers thinking, we care about these students in my class, but I know I'm not meeting their needs and I have no idea what that looks like. Help me. Honestly, my DMs, if you could read them, you would be heartbroken. It takes a lot of energy sometimes just to answer these messages, because it is heartbreaking how much these teachers and teaching assistants want to be the best teacher for their students, but they're juggling so much and they don't know where to start.
And also when they're kind of they as you said, they know they're not meeting, they want to, and then the parent is kind of can be attacking them, not always, but you can have that attack because their child isn't being met.
Yeah, it comes through fear and anxiety and exclusion. So even for even if it's not intentional exclusion, the child isn't having the learning or the environment that they need in order to thrive. And yes, that's not that particular teacher's fault, but they are the ones at the door. They're the face of the problem, and I can totally understand why that happens. We get parents. They have to have an EHCP when they come to us. So often there's a lot of fighting that happens before they get through the door for us. And you can see parents are exhausted by the time their students come into my class. They have nothing, no fight left. And so we don't see the battle. We don't see the fight. They come to us once it's won. So I don't.
You're there at the end of the marathon with the silver blanket.
Yeah, honestly, and I can see the heartache, I can see the heartbreak, but also I'm attached to a mainstream school, so I'm not naive into how long these things take, how thorough, how much is involved. Also the heartbreak for the teachers and the Senkos involved as well. We all want what's best for the child. Sometimes it's not up to us to cut that red tape and let them in. It just doesn't happen like that. Like I said, I could fill my class 3 times over just for the children in the mainstream. We are in the school and yet the children are still not in my class. There is nothing I can do, the teachers can do, Senko can do in order to make that happen. It's way above us. And it's heartbreaking, honestly. But that's where my stuff comes in. I think that's why it was so important that I make such affordable, digital, easily downloadable curriculums and assessment tools. And, oh God, I've got so much training, all sorts of things. I share everything I make, I share on there because I just think, well, I'm already making it for myself anyway. So have it. Just have it. If it gives you a start. Because otherwise, I feel like I'm only supporting 10 children in the UK, and I am far aware there are hundreds of thousands out there that need an SEN teacher that knows what they're doing, that knows what Vikings looks like, and I feel like it's such a drop in the ocean, me only teaching these 10 children, that if I could share just a little bit and just impart a little bit of confidence, ideas, whatever, in other schools in the UK, then I feel like I don't have to feel less guilty, I suppose. But I'm only keeping it to these 10. I just feel helpless, honestly. I'm seeing things fall apart, and I just want to help.
It's interesting. Everyone keeps telling me get on TikTok, and in my head I think
You
of my
should get on
children and
TikTok.
dancing, and I hate that. And I was going, it's not just dancing. So I joined TikTok, I think early June, mid June, and I went, right, I'm going to find some accounts which aren't dancing. And I found like 6 accounts, and I followed them, and you were one of them. And I
Right.
think I watched a tour of your classroom, and I
Yeah.
watched a video on sensory circuits.
Okay. Yeah.
And I watched that. And then a week later, I think I was at Autism Birmingham. And I'm
Yes.
literally going, I know her. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And literally, I can't believe out of the 6 accounts I followed, I bumped into 2 of the people at the autism shows.
It's a very small community.
But I love the fact, and it's interesting. Every so often I'm watching your videos, and it is really nice. And it is really nice, practical. This is what it looks like. This is what it is.
It's small steps, right?
Small steps.
You know, us adults need small steps too. It's yes, okay, you want your child to sit and engage in the learning with the group. But actually, there is so much needs to happen before that. Here's what it looks like. Use this resource. Work up this way. Build a relationship this way. You know, I'm almost making the small steps for the teacher almost.
Interesting. There's a book which is all about website design and designing apps, and the book is called "Don't Make Me Think," and it is actually realizing if you ask someone to do a big thing, they're not going to do it. If you want them to do it, you don't make them think, which is the whole thing with the small steps.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
you can't obviously spend, well, here's a 5-hour lecture on the theory of why I do this one little thing. No, you're not going to do that. What they want to do is, what does it look like? What's the impact? Go away, try it, go, oh, this worked.
And I think why Instagram and TikTok are so great for that is because you're limited with time. It's short form media, isn't it? Ultimately, you want it to be 30 seconds, absolute maximum 90 seconds for a per post. So in 90 seconds, I've got to explain how I assess my classroom. So you've got to get to the meat of it. You know, we don't have that much time, but in 90 seconds, I can show you what Vikings looks like in my classroom, or I can show you what resources I'm using, or I can show you my attention autism for stage 1 that day. And I think just those little bite-sized nuggets of ideas, inspiration, confidence, whatever it is, they're digestible for teachers. They're less scary. It's colourful. It looks fun. It looks enjoyable. I think it comes across that I adore my kids. I adore my classroom. I adore my job. And I think that's quite nice to see as well. When you're feeling beaten down and broken by the system, I think it's really nice to see somebody energetic and full of encouragement and energy talking about this stuff. But I think the fact that it's bite-sized, that it's 30 seconds of, why don't you just try this? It feels doable. It feels manageable.
Yeah.
I can do that. And then they're seeing results, and then they're going back for the next 30 seconds, and they're seeing real change. Whereas if I was to hold an hour lecture on this is how you do it, I don't think it would have the same impact, honestly. It's not visual enough. It's not bite-sized enough.
I think you almost need the first few steps to go, oh, this is working, to then engage for an hour.
Yeah.
There is whole times where that hour long on a topic makes sense to reflect on it, but you've kind of got to be in the door and willing to sit down to be able to
Exactly.
listen.
Exactly. So I've just started a podcast, and if I'd have started the podcast first before the bite-sized social media nuggets, no one would listen to it because I haven't built my authority. I haven't built, respect and understanding. I haven't got them through the door. Whereas now I feel like now's the time. I've nearly been on this platform for a year now. Now's the time to get that long form, get deeper, get richer into that conversation, and really talk about the whys and the hows, and really unpick those. Whereas actually sometimes it's too much. It's too overwhelming for a teacher that's in complete crisis. They just need, a magic wand, and why don't you just try this? Why don't you just try this?
Elusive magic wand buried next to the money tree.
Yeah. When we find it, we're going to be so on it.
So bring it back to assessment. So you have the small steps, and and again, what's great about the small steps is when you do have other adults, other professionals in the classroom, it's now not relying on the teacher to have all that knowledge. And that's what I like, is having those small steps, and you can do it purely digitally, my favorite, but you can also do it in paper, teacher's favorite. But it means you're giving those small steps to the other professionals, to the TAs, to the HL, to whatever it is, And they can actually now see what we're looking for, what we're working towards, what are the
Yeah.
objectives. And because they're small, they can make that decision. They can be involved in that conversation. It's not like the old P level paragraphs,
No, that's right.
which
I've made
paragraph best fits them.
Yeah, and often teaching assistants are overwhelmed by that, and they don't think it's for them. Whereas with these small statements, so all of my learning objectives and IEPs come from the B squared statements, and my TAs have full ownership over what that looks like for a child. So as part of my planning, I give them ideas on what it could be over that half term, but they pick what activities they're going to do for that child each day. They pick what learning objective they're going to work on that day. They pick what IEP they're going to work on that day. They have full ownership. And by doing that, it gives them responsibility and just credit and respect, honestly. Like, they know that child best. They know where they're at that day. Should it be an outdoor activity? Should it be indoor? Why should it be up to me to decide 6 months ago what that child should look like on a Monday? It's far more meaningful and realistic to think for the teaching assistant that knows them well to come in, to look at them and think, right, you're already lining up. Let's get this target done. You're already halfway there. Let's do it. And it also means that when they're seeing things throughout the day, because they know them so well, because they've been working on them, they've been reading these statements, they know what it looks like for that child. They've been seeing them on Eversense on the iPad. They know what it looks like. When they see something randomly happen outside on the playground or in PE, even though it's nothing to do with whatever we're doing, they'll think that's their IEP. And I love it when they do that. They go, that's one of their IEPs. Grab the iPad, is what they do. And it makes me so proud because they're fully taking ownership of the assessment and, the achievements of the child that is in their care. And often they have a couple of children in their care. So they're doing a really, really great job. And it also means that they can be involved in the EHCP reviews. They can be involved in parents' evening. And it just gives, why couldn't they? Why shouldn't they? They're more than capable of doing it. And it means that I have more time to sort out their communication devices, facilitate the most incredible learning, to support them, maybe behaviour manage with the student, and to be there, rather than, I couldn't even imagine being the sole assessor for 10 children. I wouldn't get anything else done.
I also think it completely transforms how that teaching assistant, how that professional is looking at that child, because by knowing what those targets are and seeing them achieve it, you're already feeling like this child is making progress.
Yeah.
I am making a difference. We are doing stuff. This is great.
Yeah.
Whereas here's today's worksheet, or here is what you're working on today, and you work through it all, and you're like, well, have we made progress? What are we
Yeah.
doing? Why are we doing? What am I supposed to be looking out for? And by getting that person involved, this is what we're looking out for. This is what we're hoping to achieve. This is what kind of, if you get an opportunity to get any of these in, if you can segue into it, do it, go for it,
Yeah.
get it done, celebrate it. That's
Yeah.
what you want.
And often, because lots of my learning looks like play, it's not about the end result. So unless they know the why of why we're doing the puzzle or the tough tray, it will last a couple of seconds because the TA is not even invested in the why. Why are we actually doing? What are we looking for? Are they just pouring water into water? Well, they'll be like, okay, yeah, they've done it. We're going to go and do that now. Or are they, I don't know, mixing colours, or are they learning about capacity? What is it that they're learning? If they know that, then the adult can model it. The adult can model the language. They can really be looking for those skills and assessing. And then when they do tell me, rather than saying, yeah, they didn't really like that, as their assessment feedback, or yeah, they just threw it and then they walked off. I'm like, okay, but could they do capacity? Were they interested in it pouring out? That's the question. But if they know what they're looking for, then their feedback to me is far richer, giving me a much greater understanding as to what they can and can't do in order to then plan next steps, I suppose. And then when I'm explaining to parents as well, because they're seeing statements on their learning, when they're seeing the photos sent home via the iPad app, they can then say, oh yeah, they can do that, or maybe at home we could try this or that, and they're fully involved in that holistic approach of where that child is at and the next steps there. So we're seeing great progress because everyone's involved, and it feels achievable because it's just a little sentence and it doesn't feel scary. Whereas, like you said, the P scales paragraphs with big words in it that don't mean anything, that's up to the teacher. That's for the teacher to do. I just don't understand that. Why wouldn't you involve everybody?
It's like we all look on a sat nav as you're driving down the road. How long left? Oh, it's gone down. I know how long. Oh, we're down to the last hour. I won't stop. You're kind of using those. You're seeing the progress. You're making decisions based on the information you've got. If you literally had no idea on how long left or how far or anything on your journey, you just had to drive this journey and you'll arrive at some point, you will be in a completely different mode. You might
Yeah.
end up stopping for the toilet 2 minutes before you got there. You might kind of everything will be different because you don't have the information. As soon as you have that information that we are making progress, we are doing stuff. You're thinking about you're almost there. I best call them to get a cup of tea on. All that sort of stuff you can act on because you have that information.
Yeah.
And to me, obviously assessment, but assessment is at the heart of all
Yeah.
that.
Otherwise, those small steps are going to be missed, aren't they? So I've got lots of learners that are working at 3 months. They've got cognitive visual impairment. They're highly complex. Their steps look so minuscule. They could so easily be missed. Is it a fleeting eye look? Is it blinking? Is it reaching out? Those things could be missed if the TAs weren't aware that we are looking for those and they're important steps in their journey. And how upsetting if they're doing all this hard work. That student is doing all this hard work and it's being missed.
Yes. And it completely transforms that communication with parents as well.
Yeah. Yes,
How was
because we can
school today?
celebrate it.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can go, oh, they did this, or they did this. They're like, oh, they
Yeah.
might even come back and went, he did this at home
Yeah.
because maybe they didn't show it at home, but maybe processing and then realizing at home he can do something.
Yeah.
Because it makes all those conversations so much.
Yeah, because otherwise, what's in the forefront of our mind when we're writing the homeschool books or in the gate? It's behaviour, right? It's whatever disruptive thing they did, or whatever inappropriate thing they did, or unsafe thing they did. Whereas actually, if in the forefront of my mind is these statements of what they have achieved, then we go up to the gate saying they did this or they did that, or we send home photos saying they did this. I mean, what a nicer relationship to build with the parents than that. And I do think that's what's made the difference this year. I've really seen, because lots of our parents can't drop off at the gate. Lots of the children are taxied in. That's another SEN provision barrier that we have
Yeah.
between parents and relationships. Whereas sending these photos home, often daily, shows the parents that they're happy at school, they're safe at school, but also that we understand and celebrate their children. And ultimately, I feel like that's all parents want. They want them to feel safe, and they want them to be and they want them to be making progress. That's our job, isn't it, at school? And to really know their child, know where they're at, and celebrate them. I think that builds really good relationship with parents, so that when something does go wrong or when something's not right and we need to have those tricky conversations, we can do it from a place of, we know your child, we love your child, we want the best for your child, how can we help, rather than, well, you're always telling me they're doing this and that and that and that, and where there's already that barrier up, that fight that we were talking about before. They go back into that mode. Whereas actually, I feel like having those regular photos and regular celebrations go home has really helped kind of stop that.
I also think with everyone involved, when you are celebrating things, the negative bits aren't as big.
Yeah.
Because when there's no positive, the negative big thing is the big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
And that's what
it makes more sense, maybe. Sometimes the negative thing makes more sense. Oh, they're throwing because in the statement about maths, that's where they're at. They're at the tipping stage. Oh, I see. It's learning for them. Rather than comparing them to their cognitive age of, well, why are they throwing and tipping and posting? It just makes it make sense.
yeah.
It gives it meaning. Oh, that's why.
And you might say, yeah, it had a really bad day, but it was because we were doing something new, which he didn't quite enjoy. But you can link, you're much more positive in your attitude towards the child. And as you said,
Mm,
you've already built amazing relationships with the parents that when
yeah.
it's not a good day, they're not going to get you a really long email
Yeah.
when they get home,
No.
which will be like, you didn't do this, you never do this. I constantly, it's like, that's not going to happen because you've got that relationship.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So, assessment, small step, TAs involved. You're obviously sharing those celebrations with parents. How do you use that assessment data? Yeah, that's the thing. Data is the stuff. How do you turn it into information? How do you make use of it?
Yeah, so it's for next steps ultimately, because we've got the children for 7 years, and we are our own worst enemy. We can get stuck in, but this is how it's always been done, or this is what the child always does, and their rigidity and our rigidity can be for a really difficult thing. Like, we don't like change. None of us like change. So when we're assessing, it's a really good reminder of, look, this is how far they've come. But actually, I can't tick that box yet because they haven't quite got that yet. Great. That will inform what we do next half term or next week or next term. It helps us moving forward to the ultimate goal. Otherwise, we will just get stuck and we will spend 7 years doing the same things because that's what's comfortable and that's what keeps the peace. And ultimately, we're an education system. We're a school. We should be pushing. We should be making progress where appropriate and where possible, and facilitating that. Well, these statements remind us, yes, that is what's missing in their profile. Yes, they're great at running and climbing, but actually, I've never seen them pick something up and see if they can lift it up and keep balance. They might be able to, but I've never seen it. Right, let's facilitate that next week. Or, right, we're doing, water cycles. Yes, they know how to pour and but they don't know how to do this. Right, that's what I'm going to work on next week. It keeps it fresh, it keeps it new, it keeps us moving forward, so that after the 7 years, when they finally leave us at year 6, we can fully and realistically show this is what they can do. This is what we've achieved. And it's really, and it gets, in their EHCP, it informs those as well. So typically, an SEN pupil needs at least one EHCP review, so educational healthcare plan review, every year, every 12 months. And the assessment data, the percentages of their levels go into that, and it compares to last year. That's just part of the review process. So parents, even if they don't know what those percentages mean, and we do explain it and we go through it in depth, within the meeting, but just the numbers going up shows that they are making progress and they are achieving, and we are doing something. And it's great for us to know as well. It's great for parents. It's great for the students if they're able to understand that they're making progress. In fact, in my last school, we used to make the statements as a sticker book. My pupils aren't able to do that this year, but in my last school we did. So they had a little sticker book and they had symbols at the top of their statement that they were working on, and they when they achieved it in class, they got a little sticker so they could show their parents how close they were to it, fully achieving that skill, and it made it meaningful for them. So that's
Definitely.
kind of how we're celebrating. That's how we're showing it. That's how we're using statements for next steps.
Do you use any of the visualizations from the software, any of the graphs?
No. Well, yes, actually, we do use it if we need a banding change, or sometimes in the EHCP review we use it. Sometimes to show when they're transitioning to the next school, we can use it. We use it for our own data more often than sharing. Yeah.
Because it's always interesting. There's all this amazing
Mm,
stuff that we do, and it's amazing. All this, and it's like, what is it people use? Because to me, seeing a percentage is one thing, but if you do the individual progress report, you
that's
can do
it.
starting point and ending point, and what I like about that is you can see that one area is higher than the other, but that area where they're lowest in is actually where you've made the most progress, because that's where you've put all the effort in this year, because that's where they've been struggling.
Right. And also, if there's a plateau, then unpick that. Why is there a plateau? And it's because, I don't know, we stopped doing that lesson, or we've stopped assessing it in that way. Actually, maybe they are still making progress, but we need to look at that. It says a lot. Data is crucial, isn't it, to keeping our practice really high quality.
And that's the thing is, I think some people think of assessment as I assess, then it goes to whole school data, and I don't ever do anything with it.
Mm.
And to me, that's not the point of assessment. The point of assessment is all the stuff you talked about. It's for the teacher, it's for the TAs, it's for the parents. It's
It's for
about
the people. Yeah.
it's about those celebrating the small things. It's about informing the next things.
Yeah.
Yes, it will go into higher level data, and you might look at that and think about, as you say, changing bands and longer term things. But
Mm.
to me, assessment is an ongoing thing
Yeah.
to celebrate
Yeah, and
progress.
even if you're not doing it on a program, you're doing it in your head anyway. So you might as well have a program that goes along with that. Like, in our heads, we will be breaking things up into small steps, and we will be saying, "Oh, yes, I've achieved that. What's next?" Already. So getting that down onto something that's actually tangible is really helpful.
But something tells me you're probably very, very good at breaking it down because you've been working at this level for so long.
Yeah, and because I've worked, well, I suppose initially I might have used the statements to help me understand the broken down process and the step back process more. But the more you do it, the more confident you get at it.
Yeah.
But lots of people out there haven't been teaching this stuff for 17 years. Lots of people that might have been teaching for 17 years, but they haven't been teaching in this way for 17 years. So it's about just accepting that and then learning that there is a way out there. There is help out there. There are people out there to help. There are systems out there to help. It's all been done for you. It's just knowing where to go and how to tap into that and how to utilize that for your students. And I think that's where we come in, isn't it, Dale?
It is. It is. That's the sort of thing. It's really weird because, yes, I'm doing a podcast, and this is the first episode in 200 or something where we've actually talked about our products.
That's so
It
interesting.
feels really odd. It feels
That's
like I'm just
interesting to me.
because there is so much else other than assessment. To
Yeah.
me, there is so many things people struggle with, and assessment is so crucial. And I can talk about it, but it's nice hearing what it looks like in the classroom, the
Yeah.
impact. That's what I want. That's what I want to hear. It
But that's
works.
interesting, isn't it? Because I've also been doing my social media for a year and not spoken about assessment. And yet we both agree that is interwoven into everything. So why is that? Is it because, I don't know, is it because I'm worried that it's going to scare people off? It looks too, I don't know. I don't know why I haven't spoken about it either, but I do feel like it's incredibly important. It is literally embedded and interwoven into every single decision I make in my room.
I think it is. It's like when you're running a business, you need an accountant. You're not going to spend much time on it. You're going to spend the least because it's quite scary and it's boring. And I think
Yeah.
people see assessment as accountability
Mm,
and they see it as boring. And I've been to
mm.
shows where people go, "Oh, assessment," and walk off, and you're like, "But you need this. This will make your life so much easier."
Yeah.
But it's there is this whole thing around assessment, which isn't the most fun thing, isn't the most exciting thing. People rush to doing the latest thing
Hmm.
without really understanding where the children are, what those next steps are, or even if that's even appropriate.
Yeah, right.
You've got to start, to me, with assessment.
Yeah. Yeah, and if it's regular, if you're doing it through the iPad app or if you're getting your TAs to do it, it's really not that difficult. If you know your children, it's not that difficult. If you've got the photos already that are already linked to the statements, it's not that difficult. Um, it really doesn't take me long because of your system, honestly. It really doesn't take me long. And I show what I need to show. I don't show any more than I need to show, and off I go.
But
I do it once a term, the official one, obviously because I'm doing it daily and it's embedded into what I'm doing and our learning objectives and our IEPs are all working towards it. It's kind of all the hard work's already done. And I just have to tick the official box and then off I go.
and I think that's a big change in people's head. They see assessment as sitting down at the end of term.
Mm,
Oh, it's going to take me ages to do all my assessment. But it's like doing it your way is like you do the assessment, you get to the end of the term, print or save PDF, send it to someone,
exactly.
and you're done. And I've spent years at my closest way of kind of explaining the best way of assessing is imagine only checking your email once a term.
Mm,
How many emails would you have?
right.
How many things have you missed? How many things have you forgotten?
Yeah.
How long will it take you to deal with all those emails? Or if you did your emails daily, weekly, you're going to be much more effective. You're going to
Yeah.
get more things done. You're not going to
You'll
miss anything.
you'll remember how to do it because if you've got to relearn the system every term because you haven't used it or opened it, then that's going to be harder. Yeah, it's exactly that. I just remembered as well that when a new people started in early years, I often support in mainstream as well. Just if when SEN children come in and I can help, and I was supporting the TA to know what to do with him. So I printed out empty individual assessment grids, all the statements,
Yep.
empty boxes, and just said, if you see something, tick it. That will help with the baseline. That will know where we're going from, at least. And it gave her a job, it gave her a role, rather than being completely out in the open, not having a clue where to go, what to look for, what to do. I think it just gave her permission that if he was playing with cars and a teacher came over and said, what are you doing? Why are you just playing with him? She could say, look, we're working on this. It almost gave her permission to be led by him and be led by the child because it gave it purpose. And I feel like if TAs are knowing the whys and taking ownership of that, it's also giving them accountability and that confidence as well to say, this is why we're doing that, this is why he can't access this, or this is why this isn't appropriate, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
I always find it, for years, people going, oh, are there any baseline tests? And I'm like, no, because that would work for your mainstream children. But as soon as you start getting below a certain level, it's not going to work.
No.
What happens if they can't read? What happens if they can't access it that way? What happens if there are so many reasons why it wouldn't work. And the simple answer is you just observe. And I literally have to say to people, ask them to write a story. Yeah. Ask them to do a game. Ask them to role play. And as you say, you can have those printed sheets out, or you can have it on an iPad and just go through different levels and going, actually, that's what I'm seeing. This is a level. He's waiting for my response. Yeah. He's given me a chance to respond. We're having a conversation, taking turns. We're there. Okay. Is he role playing? Is he thinking about what he would be doing? And you can kind of just learn just with quite think, well, this is roughly this area.
Yeah. And I don't think I could do that as effectively myself. I think I had to use and utilize my adults in my room in order to do that really effectively, because they'll see things throughout the day that I wouldn't. So it's about that as well, isn't it? So yeah, I'm using it from the moment they walk in to the moment they leave and everything in between, I think.
It's to me, it's for SEN, it's got to be ongoing, and assessment for SEN takes longer. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do to get past that. You can't have a quick silver bullet, quick fix. Doesn't exist. It's going to take longer, but hopefully with our system and other systems, it is in reality the easiest way of doing it.
I don't think it does take longer.
That's interesting.
I don't think it does. I don't think it does take longer, because I feel like we know the children so well, because we have less children for a start. We might do more compact subjects, so less breadth of subjects. And we know them so well that if we've either seen it or we haven't.
Yeah.
There's no, oh, but what kind of level are they? What are they? The statements are, it's black and white. They've either done it or they haven't. You've either seen it or you haven't. And if you haven't seen it, it doesn't necessarily mean they can't do it. It just means that you have to provide an opportunity in order for them to show you. I don't think it does. Honestly, I disagree.
That's great.
I think it's incredibly achievable, fast, not mind numbing. I don't ever take it home, ever, ever, ever. And I can do it. I can assess my whole class in one PPA time, and I don't think a mainstream teacher could say that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, because everyone just says, "Oh, it takes so long." And I know when you start using us, if you're bringing us into a whole school, that initial working out and baselining and really working out where is each child working. They're never at the beginning; they're halfway through.
Maybe because they're not utilising their teaching assistants. Maybe because if I was just the teacher and I had no data from my teaching assistants at all, if we were starting, if I was just doing it once a term by myself, I had no paperwork, no photos, no nothing. Yeah, it would probably take me a long time. But because we're doing it every day and my TAs can give me all the stuff they've collected and on Eversense app, all of the photos they've collected linked to them with statements, most of the work's already done for me. So I'm not over exaggerating. I mean, I hope my head teacher's not watching this, but it really is like, I don't understand. I would, as far as assessment time goes, I think mainstream have it way harder if you are utilising all other systems.
Yeah, I think they do. But I think there is also a thing about doing it as a completely separate thing, whereas you've talked about how much you're using it. It's informing the next steps. It's involved in parental communication. Yes, it's going to go into whole school data and stuff like that, but you're using it in your classroom and with that communication. I think schools don't do that, which means they're assessing and then they're doing other stuff to cover that. And I'm like, you have your data. If you kind of use it, and I did a webinar recently about kind of implementing and using connecting steps effectively. And it's any system. Is you have a system, are you getting the most out of it? Are you doing it well? Are you not duplicate? What are you using it for? How are you using it? because you're literally using it in the perfect way.
I feel like I am. I feel like because we're using it as learning objectives and IEP targets and all of that, the child is accessing those assessment statements every single day. So therefore we are. So we are, and we only change our learning objective once every half term or full term. So they have a full 6 weeks or 12 weeks to work on those targets. So after 12 weeks, I can tell you what the statements are. I don't even have to look at it because we've been practicing it over and over and over again. So I know perfectly well what the child can do in that subject or that, target.
So I'm going to wrap it up. I would love to keep talking. We've hardly mentioned ever since, which I'm going to ask you about even more afterwards.
Yeah.
But thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
It's interesting. I normally, obviously, we go into schools and we do the initial training. We don't often just get to sit down with a classroom teacher. I talk to senior leaders at a higher level data, but to sit down and actually talk to someone who's using it ongoing in the classroom has been really fascinating.
Oh, that's great.
Now, Jordan's given me links, so you'll find information about the sensory curriculum she's mentioned on her website. You'll be able to find her Instagram and become one of those many followers, and also her TikTok, which is where I found her, and her Facebook group. So please go and check out Jordan. It will what's all the stuff she's doing. It's part of it. It's sensory class, isn't it?
Yeah, sensory class or sensory classroom. Yeah.
Please go have a look at all of that. Really useful. Hopefully it'll help you. And obviously Beachsquare products were mentioned. And as always, you will find links in the show notes alongside all of Jordan's. And you can book a meeting with me to take you through our software and what it can do for you. And as always, wherever you listen to the podcast or on the website, you'll find those show notes. So thank you for listening to the show. If you're listening through a platform that allows you to review the podcast, give it a rating, please give it a little review. Or give it that 5-star rating and let others know what you think. And if you want to get in touch, let us know your thoughts, suggest topics or anything else, please send us a message on social media or send an email to hello@thesencast.com. The Sencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. We help to show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make, and we can do this for a wide range of abilities and ages. We have a range of frameworks to suit students from birth all the way through to 25 with our Steps for Life framework that assesses functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills. And for the most complex learners working with the engagement model, our engagement steps can build a profile of the student's needs and show that progress they are making. Visit the B Square website or click on that meeting link in the show notes, as I said, to book a meeting with me to take you through what our assessment software can do and how it can help you. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Sencast. It is goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone.